Cocktail, but because my last name is Falangetti, I'm ethnically required. If I hold a mic in one hand, I must hold a cocktail in the other hand. And by the way, notice that the only people reciting that were alpha class because Matt did such a crappy job with beta class. There's other fools in here, but
I learned nothing.
It's freaking terrible. But since, by the way, since Matt was beta class and he was my dearest confidant, to all you beta class members here, he didn't really like you.
We knew that. We knew that.
That was very
It pains me. One of the greatest things about being here right now is remembering that time in my life and in my fraternity brother's life when we were young and the world was before us and we all thought we would conquer it. And I candidly, as perhaps the fraternity's crazy Italian in alpha class, was oftentimes more emotional than I ought to have been, less reasonable at times. And Matt was my confidant. Some of the fraternity brothers might remember we would have our Sunday meetings in our fraternity where we all get together and discuss the issues for our house. But every Sunday afterward, Matt and I would go to the little ice cream place right down the road from the fraternity house, and we'd sit there for 2-3 hours catching up, and he was my level, he was my confidant, he was the guy that we would share everything with, and he kept me where I needed to be for each and every day. I probably wouldn't have got through college in the same way without him. I think many of us know that in our fraternity brother, he was one of the guys that was tight with everyone. He was a unifier in every sense of the word. He wasn't just my confidant. I know he was there for other people too. But on top of all that, he was pardon my language, he was a crazy motherfucker. You know that in college. He really was. So we would, at one point in time, funny story. Needless to say, we were partying a lot, drinking a lot. And one night, Matt had his apartment. It was on a side street near DP, Del Playa there. And we were all out partying and drinking. He got home late, was by himself, drunk as a skunk. He goes in and he puts a chicken pot pie in his oven because he's hungry. And then he passes out on the couch, only to be awoken by the fire department who had to kick in his door because the chicken pot pie caught fire in the oven and set off the smoke alarm on his place. And so literally the fire department had to kick in the door and they're waking him up. It was nothing of a fire, but it was enough that the fire department came and it was hysterical.
I do not know the story.
But, it was one of those things where, Matt took that event and kind of changed his college life after that moment and was sober for the rest of college after that. That was a moment where he spent the rest of the time in our college life sober. But it didn't stop him from being a wild man. And so one of our fraternity brothers is Scott Waugh, who is now kind of a semi-famous director. But when we were younger, his family was a stuntman family. And Scott was a stuntman, his brother was a stuntman, his dad had been a stuntman and a stunt coordinator. And if you wanted to see somebody do something crazy, Scott Waugh was the guy to do the impossible. And so one year for New Year's, my parents got a big condo up in Tahoe, and a bunch of us all went up there to Lake Tahoe to party for New Year's. And Waugh was there, and Matt was there, and me, and some other fools from the house. And Scott Waugh was a skiing maniac. And we would get up on Heavenly, and Scott Waugh would just bomb the mountain. And freaking Matt, who was nowhere near as good of a skier, not even close, was chasing him. And I was trying to hold back and not kill myself. and Matt was flying down on the edge of death like a lunatic. And he spent the whole trip like that, day after day. And but he was willing to do it. So I always think back on a number of things with Matt, but he was my closest confidant. And the guy I leaned on all the time. And God knows I'm going to miss him. And I know my fraternity brothers are all here are going to miss him. God bless him. Thanks.